Can you just press the button on that? Great. Good evening. Welcome to the Employment Policy Committee on Tuesday, the 7th of November at 7:30 p.m. We're meeting here in the meeting room at Sycamore House. The meeting is being live streamed, so please be aware of that. And obviously, if we go into confidential alert section, then we will be ending the live stream. So that moves me on to item number 1, to note councillors' apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Got a full house tonight, Chair.
There we go, that's always nice. Doesn't always happen. Item 2, to note declarations of interest and matters on the agenda. I don't have any interest, I think we can order. Okay, we will approve the meetings of the previous, we'll approve the minutes of the previous meetings. So that's all on the agenda. Are there any particular issues on it, or can we agree it? Okay, so the minutes are agreed. Item 4, public speaking. To receive representations from members of the public and matters on the agenda, please, I will end that sentence there. We have no members of the public who've registered to speak, so I will not go into the details of that.
No written representations either.
And that moves us on to item 5, to receive a report on health and safety matters affecting employees and council activity.
Yes, this is an oral report, I'm afraid, Chair. We were due to have our health and safety annual visits from WorkNest during October, but they've now been rescheduled for the 2nd and 3rd of January due to their availability, not anything to do with us, for our particular health and safety person suffered bereavement. So that's why they've been delayed. And we'll report on those when they've happened. We've added to our array of risk assessments when we used the tractor and flail for the landscaping work. We had a tractor and flail on hire during October, so we added to that suite of risk assessments, and we are, with the landscaping work, we're gradually adding risk assessments as we undertake new tasks as we go along. We've had no reported incidents or injuries or near misses amongst the landscaping team since they started working with us, but we have had an injury to a member of staff since the last meeting, which was at an event, community event, where a member of staff was injured, but it was not it was very painful, but it was not a serious, long-lasting injury. Not sure if this really falls within the remit of this committee, but we have also had a report about a slipping incident at Albert Street toilets that concerned a member of the public, and that's been being dealt with. I think as it concerns personal data, that's not something we should talk about in this meeting, but I just wanted to make you aware that we've had that happen. We've now got a chainsaw specific first aid kit, which goes out with the team whenever any chainsaw work is undertaken, and we've updated the first aid equipment generally to include hemostatic dressings and tourniquet because of doing chainsaw work. And other than that, unless anybody's got any questions, we don't really have anything to report on health and safety.
Any questions on the members of the committee? No, then we will move on to item 6, to note progress of loan working arrangements for all employees.
Yes, with this, again, it's an oral report. You may remember that at the last meeting, we talked about the loan working arrangements for all the different members of the employee team, and noted that the finance manager and the administrator didn't have work phones, but did undertake loan working and went out to our various different premises. And it was recommended that they be provided with work phones. I've talked to them both about this, and both employees have expressed the view that they would prefer to use their own personal phones for the purpose of keeping in touch and checking in, and they don't really want a further phone. They'd rather just stick with one phone and use their own phone. So I having had the conversations with them, my view would be that those wishes should be respected, and we do have their telephone numbers and we're able to phone them and they're able to phone us. So
do they have the Teams app on their phone?
They can have the Teams app on their phone if they choose to download it onto. I mean, everyone who's got a work phone has got Teams on the phone, but they could choose to download the Teams app onto their phone if they wanted to. But I obviously need to report back to you on that. I mean, the administrator goes to Spotlight and Newton Lees fairly regularly, Spotlight particularly, and there is a handset there in addition to the home phone. And of course, everyone takes their computer with them when they're home working, so they can make Teams calls from their computer as well. So I think that's good enough, but it's a matter for you.
What's the advantage with having Teams on your phone then?
Well, actually, there's probably none if you've got your laptop in front of you and you've got the Teams on. You're in constant communication. You can be in constant communication with your first. You can see their status. You can quite quickly see if they're.
Oh, right.
Also, landline calls for our council come through Teams, so we don't have physical phones anymore. With our soft phones through Teams.
Oh,
so wherever they are, that's their landline as well.
Okay.
And I think we were right that we needed to have the phones, the individual phones for landscaping. I think that was a sound decision, because they are constantly remote. Although having said that, they do tend to pair up a lot of the time. And we had looked, in addition to looking at phones, we looked at tracking of landscaping equipment, I think for twin purposes of security of equipment, but also staff safety again being considered. But having looked into it, and bearing in mind that they've got phones, and that at the moment they do quite a lot of work in pairs, that we know where they are, we know where they're meant to be anyway, and they check in very regularly. I think the management team view was that the expense for the tracking didn't really justify the benefits at this stage. So, my recommendation, unless we hear differently when our health and safety visit happens in January, is that we would stay as we are with the arrangements for lone working.
With regards to phone calls, I think that there's two things that I would say that maybe have not been considered. One is whether personal data is ever used, and people send text messages to personal mobiles, and it can be very difficult from a GDPR perspective to do that. So something to be mindful of. I forgot my second point. I do think it is better to be in control of all of the devices that are used for a work purpose. But I also don't want to push everything onto employees that they either don't think they'll find value from, or that I think that we do need to have some policies and guidance about what personal mobiles can be used for. Sorry, remember what I was going to say. The other thing is also a personal data thing, is if we have if people have work mobiles, of course they can be given to others in furtherance of their council's business, but actually I would not feel comfortable about employees having their personal mobile numbers in the public domain. As many of you may know, even me as a councillor, I have a separate councillor mobile number to my own personal number, because it got to the point where it was actually having a massive impact on my life. So I just think we should be mindful of that.
And I think that it's a matter of the way it works in practice at the moment is that it's a matter of choice whether employees choose to share their personal phone number with other employees, and some do choose to do that. And that's, you know, not really for business purposes, but it is for social purposes, I guess, and for emergencies. But we have other members of staff who I obviously have their personal numbers on the HR files, but they don't share any personal numbers with other members of staff, and that's perfectly acceptable, isn't it?
I suppose we have to put it back to you. It's like, what do you feel that you need, and are you okay with what's been suggested by these two particular individual employees?
I think I am, because they are the ones who go out the least, really. I think we should trial it and see, you know, see if anything happens over the next 6 months, and see what the view of the competent person is when she comes out in January.
Okay. So we are to note the progress. Noted. That moves us on to item 7, to consider introduction of an employee uniform policy for the council.
Yes, if I could introduce that briefly, Chair. The reason that we've considered introducing this is sort of two reasons. Now that we have the landscaping team, we have more people wearing uniform, and we've had some issues with uniform being worn in different circumstances in the past. So it seemed sensible and good practice to introduce a uniform policy and ensure that we're not overspending, and that it's really clear to people what they can expect from the council and what we can expect from them in terms of the uniform. But also some issues, as I say, some other issues that have arisen during recent months, and during appraisal feedback, we'd had some feedback when we were doing the 360 feedback. We had some feedback about appropriate dress for managers and office-based staff as well. So that's why I put the draft uniform policy on the table, and it's a matter for you to discuss. The uniform policy would be non-contractual, and it could be amended by the council at any stage, but I think it's helpful for it to be documented. And I mean, I haven't included that in the policy. With hindsight, that should have been made explicit in the policy that it was non-contractual, but I think it should be made. I think there should be something documented so that everyone understands what the situation is with uniform.
So I mean, we can say, you can amend that to say it's non-contractual in your in our decision. One thing that's just come to my mind is just around dress code, and we just need to make sure that I don't know if we need to have a reference there, but for those who wear clothes of religious purposes, etc., just to make sure that they still feel comfortable within this dress code.
Yeah.
Whether we need a line, I'm not quite sure exactly what that line is, but I mean, of course, if they're in this PPE role and they have to wear safety equipment, they've got to wear the safety equipment.
I think most of the uniform we have is pretty modest, but we'd cover the modest dressing aspect of it, but there may be other items that people wish to wear for religious reasons. Hasn't actually come up recently. I mean, we can seek advice from Worknest about it.
I thought when I saw the introduction to this, it was going to cover all staff, not just those with the uniform. I thought it was going to be a uniform policy.
It's a uniform for uniforms.
Yes.
But not everybody wears uniform. So as you can see from the policy.
I was hoping it was going to cover sort of management staff as well.
Well, it can do. That's a matter for you. I mean, the dress code at the moment, because we don't have a uniform policy, we have a section on dress in the employee handbook, which again is non-contractual. It's very limited. It's a very limited and short paragraph, and it talks about wearing appropriate dress, and it is quite limited now. I don't know if you remember from last time, we WorkNest are reviewing our handbook at the moment to bring it up to date. It takes them quite a long time to do it, so it's not available since I sent it off, and nothing's come back yet. We can ask them to look at that as well. I think last time we talked it through when we were reviewing the handbook on the last occasion, I think we talked about the fact that we didn't want to be too prescriptive and too onerous, but we did want a suitable standard of dress for people who are meeting members of the public in the course of their duties. So I suppose there's two elements to it. Well, there's more than two elements, but there's the kind of livery branding element.
Which is this?
Yeah, and the use of that. And then there's the appropriateness of dress in certain circumstances. And as you see, I haven't really plumped down on one side or the other policy based on it.
I don't think we necessarily need to plump down one side or the other. And I think, yes, if we've said about polo shirts and stuff, if that's what somebody feels comfortable coming into the office when that's what they want to wear, I'm fine with that as branded. But also, I think there's also a degree of polo shirts look fine, but they also, in some situations, they don't look that smart. And actually, obviously, the way that different members of staff dress, they dress in much more office wear, and that's probably more suitable for what they're doing and who they're meeting. So it gives a much higher standard than the polo shirts sometimes.
I think so. I think, we do have to recognise that some of the managers do have to go out on site visits and site inspections, and they need, on those occasions, and they may lend a hand with the members of the landscaping team or the caretaking team. If they need to, they may lend a hand, in which case they need to have appropriate PPE.
Yeah.
It's a question of how, but in terms of managers, it's a matter for you as to whether you think it's good for managers to be wearing branded uniforms so that people can identify them as employees of the council and speak to them, or whether you think it's inappropriate. It's a matter for this committee.
Well, I don't think it's necessary for managers or office-based staff to wear a branded uniform. But however, I do think it's appropriate for them to dress appropriately to the tasks that they're undertaking. And I think the point that Ed made was that if you're meeting members of the general public, I would expect a certain standard. I mean, even if you're sort of some sports, you're required to wear a certain style of, you're not allowed onto certain areas
I think if we're doing a community event, it's great to have all the stuff in branded because you will then become very highly visible. And if you're doing like the Christmas or Queensway, if you're not dressed in a Christmas outfit, having that polo shirt and the fleece makes you identifiable to the public highly. But I wouldn't expect any. I don't think we need to be prescriptive here. I think it needs to be loose, and the judgment is there. And I think I think all of our managers will use the judgment. I think all of our employees will as well. But
I think so. In my day job, we generally have a dress for the day policy. So it's if your day is included, is having. Actually, we're mostly business casual now, and people can wear jeans to the office. But if a client is coming in, then people will know that actually. We're going to a client site, we would modify how we are to their expectation. So, if it would be usual for them to wear suits and a shirt and tie, and we go to their premises, we will wear a shirt and tie, so we are respectful. And I think that this is the point that I think that you're trying to make, Councillor Ely. I also think that with regards to some of the issues that I do, and actually it's not really about the uniform, it's about conduct in the uniform, but I think there is a link. And so the things that I'm going to talk about are not illegal, but we perhaps need to think about what residents and local people would think if they saw people wearing the uniform and they were doing that, and they were doing these things. And I know that in a lot of companies that I'm aware of, or I've worked in previous companies where there was a branded uniform policy, there was a ban, or people had to cover up when they did these things. And it's things like standing outside and smoking a cigarette, going to a pub in uniform, going to a betting shop in uniform, going to amusement arcades or whatever, because people perceive the person in uniform could be working, and so therefore, what we want to make it really clear that the person is not working, and the best way of doing that is having any branding covered up when they're doing that. So don't want to say that any of these things are illegal. I think it's just about helping residents to understand when people in branded clothing are working on. So I think it would be good to have that in this policy.
So it's not explicit, is it, in the policy? It says that you are expected to wear the uniform at work and to get to and from work and to go out for necessities at lunchtime in breaks, and that I couldn't think of another way of wording that, because you might want to be able to go to a cash machine or buy a sandwich. It seems to me quite unreasonable that you've got to.
Yeah, one item says here, uniform should not be worn outside working hours other than to travel to and from work or to obtain necessities during authorised breaks.
That was my wording to cover that, but I like. But I can put these.
Add a line along something along the line of about remembering that when you're in the uniform, you're being perceived to represent the council. Yeah. So I think listing things might be a bit too much, but I think just saying something like that, representing the council.
You could give examples, couldn't you?
Yeah.
But not comprehensive.
Yeah.
So would you like me to add those examples in?
I don't know if we need necessarily examples, but I think certainly that statement about being representative of the town council.
That should be
I
think that we do need to have some examples, because it's not everybody. Some people feel safer around actual clarity, and they'll go right, and they might not be given every single situation, but they go right, I understand what it's trying to say.
Examples, I think, is what you're looking at.
Yeah.
I would like to see it in there personally.
Okay.
Personally, I think that says it all there. Authorised breaks, you wouldn't be going to pub except you're going there to eat, obviously. But I don't know. The example is it's not exhaustive. If we think about it, there's probably more to out there. Where do we draw the line? But again, like I said, some people would want it written in black and white so they're clear. But for me, I think it's good enough.
I don't think it hurts to put the examples in. Some examples. So I think just to put proposals down, as it is with those examples, plus making sure that we reference that as non-contractual, we'll leave that to the clerk to word that sufficiently. If you want to share it around with the chair and the committee, and we can just do via email yes or no. Are we? Yeah. I know you gave me a second there, but I'm assuming I've got one.
The management dress code. Say about that.
Not send the handbook, but I'm interested to see what it says there.
The handbook is really it just says things like, I think it might say no denim, but that's, I think, as much as it says. It says the actual words it used, which I think are not a good choice of words, is it's a matter of common sense. It's a matter of common sense. Well, we all know what we think about common sense, don't we? and dress in a way that's appropriate for the office or for the task that you're doing.
I'm surprised when they done it, Mark, because actually,
So I think one of the things that's happened is dress has changed quite a lot, hasn't it, in the office, particularly post-pandemic. I mean, I think the denim rule's a bit, because denim can be smart in certain circumstances. I have more trouble with sportswear actually, which I think looks very, you know, I don't want somebody coming to work in leggings or, you know, something that's overtly gym wear, you know, that, but everyone's got their own thing, haven't they?
Well, it's like shorts. If you have tailored shorts, it's totally different to sort of football shorts. And we can't even say that men can't wear skirts because there's a Scotsman's in kilts, but I know it's not skirt, believe me, but it's that sort of thing. It's to be prescriptive, you're getting into real problems.
And we have to be aware if you go down that prescriptive, you have to be aware of a whole load of stuff that, you know, it's not discriminatory in any sense. And with an employer that I may or may not work with now, there's an issue of one of our dress codes where it's a little bit messy on that side. So I'm of the view that it needs to be you dress for what the day is.
And that changes with your view now. Our views may be different. That's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, if you're managing the landscaping team, you may well be coming in a bit more in the uniform because you might end up, hopefully not very often, but going out and doing something or monitoring seeing what they're up to. I think it needs to be appropriate. I think it just needs to be appropriate. I mean, if what's in the employee handbook is what's in the employee handbook, and we're not going to look to change that tonight.
Well, I can read it to you now.
Smart casual seems to be the in phrase these days.
Oh, yeah, but what is smart casual?
Well, I agree with you.
Which side of smart casual are you on? Are you just before the seat, or are you on the?
It says here, employees should dress in a manner appropriate to the work that they do. Factors include whether or not the employee meets members of the public and whether the requirements of health and safety require particular clothing. This is largely a matter of common sense. If your manager feels that you are dressing in an inappropriate way, they may ask you to dress differently the next time you come into work. A persistent refusal to comply with a reasonable standard set by a manager will amount to misconduct. Where an employee dresses in a completely inappropriate way, for example, by wearing clothing with offensive images or slogans, then they may be sent home to change. Any time taken to go home and change will be unpaid. So denim must have gone out a bit on the last occasion.
I think that sounds okay. It's the discretion of the manager. I agree with the common sense line. It's a bit. I think you're leaving it to the discretion of the manager there. So I think that's.
I'll go with that.
Yeah.
And I think our clerk is more than able to determine what's sensible.
Coming in.
Not really.
I know that means that just because we haven't doesn't mean you should plan for it, but still.
No, we've had issues. I'm not saying we've never had an issue. We have over the years I've been here.
And there's ways you can also relax it on those really, really hot days.
Exactly. There's ways around those.
Which that's still appropriate, but.
I mean, for me, putting the uniform policy in was more about ensuring that we had clarity about the way the uniform would be issued, its care, what would happen to it when it was worn out, how that was why I wanted the uniform policy rather than matters of dress. But they do link in, don't they?
Are we all agreed with what we said before? And I don't think there needs to be any changes now on the office space one. This is all on hand, but agreed?
Yeah.
Great. Moving on to item 8. Before you do the introduction, I'm a little bit nervous about this one. And I say this because I think this alludes to an issue that we have across this council around gender balance. And actually, I don't I will never experience the menopause. I've never experienced it. So I don't quite, it's very difficult without the input of people who've been through it or about or going through it to really just help shape it. And I'm sure the clerk will introduce it, but may have her own experience or her own views on it.
I've got somewhat ambivalent views on it, to be perfectly honest, myself, because for me, I think anything that suggests that women are less capable of undertaking work or need special treatment is a bit worrying. But I have overcome that scruple because I think that more and more employers are implementing menopause policies, and they are offering support through menopause. And I think it does go towards making the workplace a more supportive environment for all members of staff and potentially councillors as well. So as I say, there's been, you know, in recent years there's been a much more open approach to sort of gender specific health issues, and I felt it was something that the council should at least consider. If you choose not to implement a menopause policy, that's a matter for you, but I thought it was something that was worthy of consideration.
I personally think we should have one. I read through it, and from what I could glean, it seems appropriate. And I actually think it's important to have one as a protection to people who do experience menopause if they ever have a manager who isn't understanding or, you know, doesn't listen to them. I think at least if you've got it in writing, then the worker and the employee is covered then. My question would be, how did this get written? Did it get input from other women in the workplace, or did you get it from?
It hasn't been consulted. The staff have not been consulted on it yet, and that's because I didn't know what approach you were going to take to it, and I didn't want to take it to the staff first. I wanted to consider what you felt about it. In terms of where the policy has come from, I was assisted in this by someone we know very well who's it's an HR expert.
I think so. So I also agree that. So I agree with all of the comments made. I think just I think it's some of the things that Ed said. You know, yes, we probably cannot experience menopause for ourselves, but we can be great allies to people who are. And I think that for me, this is being a good ally and ensuring that there is a policy in place, because I think that also what it does is many women that I've worked with don't feel comfortable talking about it, and by having a policy, what we're saying is actually you can talk about this, and if it is impacting you, then actually we will kind of deal with that in a fair manner. So for me, I would recommend the policy as well.
Yeah,
there is also.
I'm
just going to say there's help also on the on the policy. Funny enough, I was listening to Sky News this morning, and somebody came on and talked about this today. She's going on to set up this. It's called Latte Lounge. She left 2 jobs going through this. She didn't even know what she was going through at the start. So I think it's right and appropriate to have one in place.
And I think we should remember that we've got, whilst menopause in itself isn't a protected characteristic, there could be statutory duty to consider adjustments for someone who's in a particularly difficult time if the symptoms are extremely severe. I think it's a helpful thing for women, and I think that the clarity, it's the fact that that's what, for me, that's the helpful thing, the fact that it's there and there's an element of clarity about what can and cannot be expected.
I think it's good to have the policy, and I think it's, for me, it's about supporting employees who will go through this, but actually also supporting line managers in terms of how they manage it, particularly where those line managers it might be easy if you've experienced it yourself, but if you've not experienced menopause, then it's something you can refer to, and you can do that. And it's important. The period of time can be quite long, so you can have, and the symptoms can be worse or not, and it's not just a one small time of
that's right
symptoms. So managing that and making reasonable adjustments, I think, is really, really important. So because we want the best out of our employees, and I think this enables that. Are we all agreed? Or did you want to make any comments, Councillor Ely?
No, I don't really have a view specifically about this. My question is, why are we singling this out as opposed to general illness? Because rather than take this out on its own, so if someone has a serious illness, what is our attitude to that? I would hope that it's as helpful as it possibly can be, and therefore I would have preferred to see something far more general than this. And this is site specific, but women and men and the whole population suffer from cancer, heart attack, stroke, whatever. And surely, as a good employer, we would have compassion to all of it. And rather than just be specific, we're having compassion with that. I have every sympathy for people that do have that, but I think we should make it more.
I completely, so I agree with what you're saying. The one point that I would make is that so menopause is a group of symptoms that is not an illness, and so I think we can kind of separate them, because actually what people tend to do is kind of focus on, when you talk about illness, they focus on kind of illness or symptoms, and actually by having this specific policy, people can say, well, actually what I'm suffering is a menopause related symptom, I'm not ill. And so I think for me, I think that it's worth having the difference between the thing, but I also accept there are conditions that accept men, that focus on men. There are also other conditions that people have, but I think it's just, as I said before, I think it's really important to be an ally to women in this regard, and I kind of prefer to have the policy.
I accept your argument fully. But if you break your leg, you're not ill. But you want some compassion from an employer.
Is that not covered in sickness policy you've already got anyway?
Yeah, but isn't that? But I don't want to disagree with anyone, because I think what we're trying to do is the right thing.
Yeah.
I would hope it would be more general, that's all.
Well, it'd be interesting to see perhaps how it's received by the staff team.
Shall we suggest them to introduce it following consultation with staff?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So I'll make that proposal to introduce it following consultation with staff.
To be reconsidered.
And following that consultation. Are we all in favour?
Yes.
Good. Okay, we move on to consider introduction of a cycle to work employment benefit scheme. Chair Clark.
Well, yes. So we've had 2 members of staff express an interest in the government's cycle to work scheme, and asked if the town council would make the scheme available to them. And I think this should be considered for several reasons. one, because of the council's general commitment to the climate emergency and reducing carbon emissions, and but also the benefit for individual employees who would perhaps prefer to cycle to work rather than come in a vehicle. And of course, if they've got a cycle at work, it means they can use it whilst they're at work to move about the parish should they wish to do so. I would have thought that a salary sacrifice scheme is probably the best arrangement. There are tax benefits for the employee, and there is also a small benefit for the employer in terms of national insurance benefits. But there is a bit of extra admin that the council would have to do to make the payroll adjustments every month. So again, I haven't gone into detail of individual schemes. I put it to you first of all as a proposal for you to consider.
So I think we can get to the technicalities of how salary sacrifice we need to. I think the principle of this is really good. I think it aligns also with our net zero agendas and policy, and so with that in mind, I would be absolutely supportive of this. I'm sure people here may have more expertise on the salary sacrifice element and the implications of the work, and that will need to be considered. But I think in terms of that broad approach, I think it's really important that we do it.
Is it confined to cycling to work?
Yeah.
Yes.
You can't, so electric scooters don't count?
Sorry.
Well, electric scooters.
E-bikes might. But there's only one issue with this, and that is if you select a bike over the value of £1,000, and they all tend to be, then you are not FCA regulated business. You have to apply for a consumer credit licence. So most employers that I have worked for have set their cap at £1,000. So you can get a bike that is less than £1,000 because there is no there's no reason to have a consumer credit licence which comes with reams of paperwork to do for something that is potentially, in an organisation where I work, where there's 500 people, it might be worth doing, but if you've got kind of 15, it's like a sledgehammer to crack it. It might be better for us to say that we will allow people to do bikes up to the value of £1,000.
So just on that, I know sometimes there's companies and there's schemes out there that essentially manage it for you. You go through them and essentially we make the changes in the payroll, but they manage the whole the
way that it works is supplier sells bike to employer exchanges a part of the employee's salary to employee. So the employee exchanges cash for the bike, and because the contract is between the employer and the employee for the bike, not supplier and the employee, what it means is the employer would have to be registered for under the Consumer Credit Tax because it is the employer that is providing the credit. So that's why it's complicated, but if it was a contract between supplier and employee, then there would be no tax benefit to it. So therefore, this is the way that it works.
I think most people can secure, if they don't buy anything except the bike, £1,000 is still a sort of fairly reasonable amount for a bike. If you're disabled or you need a special bike for some other reason, it's not going to work for you, is it?
And there might be some other schemes available for that. Question: If an employee wanted to spend more than £1,000 and they were happy to use their own funds for the bit above £1,000,
I know the answer to that question.
So my understanding is actually it's the value of the bike.
Okay.
So if there can't be a contract between the employee and the supplier, so there can be no side deal it's so even if the employee said I would part pay and say, and it was £500, essentially the supplier is providing a £1,500 bike to the employer, and therefore, and I do understand that actually the rules used to be zero, and this was when I joined the NHS 16 years ago, a really big thing, and the government at the time were lobbied and said, please can we have a de minimis level where actually the bikes under this level are not, because there were lots of NHS trusts that did not have consumer credit licenses, neither did they want them. So
now let's make me think about my employer who does season ticket stuff, and that.
So that's a completely different thing. And a season ticket loan is not a salary sacrifice loan, it's a net pay loan.
Oh, well, no, for us. Oh, it's a 75%, 75% discount on season tickets, but it's a bit different.
I guess in the next step, if you're broadly in agreement, is for us to find the right scheme for us. And
I would think that one thing that I've learned, there are lots of big suppliers. There are some small suppliers as well. We ask the employees, some of the smaller suppliers work with independent shops. We put it to the employees themselves. Would you like us to be with a big national supplier, or would you like us to be with a small, and actually they chose where they would want it to go, because you want to make sure the scheme suits them. Yeah. And some people don't want to go and buy a bike from a big national brand. No, so I think it's and they feel that they might get a more specialist service from a local bike shop. So don't even know if we've got one in Bletchley and Stratford.
We have one in Bletchley, Fenny, I don't believe, but we've got plenty. There's several in Milton Keynes. Yeah. I think on that, given the low our staff and numbers, probably it's better to just allow employees to choose a local, because I imagine the big ones come with some expectation on numbers.
I don't think so. Because I think quite a lot of employees have a lot of employers have small numbers in their scheme.
Okay.
So I don't know. We just need to find the right scheme. I think if you're in agreement with a salary sacrifice scheme, then that's the way I think we should need to find the right scheme.
Okay, so are we in agreement with the salary sacrifice scheme?
Yep.
And a clerk to have officers to investigate the details of the scheme and options? Agreed?
Yeah.
Amazing. Item 10, this is our agenda item to consider whether we exclude members of the public, if that's necessary, for the remaining items on the agenda in order to preserve confidentiality about individual employee performance and terms and conditions. Are we in agreement?
Yeah. Consider that constitutes personal data, so I think we can make that decision there.
There we go. We always make the right decision, I hope.
So with that, I will end the streaming.